What's going on, guys? So I think most of you will agree when I say that one of the most difficult things for a person to do is to remove their bias from a situation. Now I say that only because I like Totem products. I've had a lot within the past 10 years, and suffice to say, yeah, I am biased towards them, which means this review is going to be extra challenging for me because, yeah, clearly I like Totem, so I'm going to work very, very hard to give you all the most neutral review that I can possibly muster about these speakers. So, with that said, let's talk about the Totem Acoustic Hawk. Alright guys, and here it is, the Totem Acoustic Hawk. And as most of you can tell, this is going to be a beautiful looking, compact, 2-way floor standing loudspeaker. Now the Hawks carry a price tag of roughly $3,250 US and come in a pretty wide variety of finishes. Now the Hawk was designed for 3 different purposes. Number 1 was to give you true full range output from a very compact loudspeaker. Number 2 is it was designed to throw out this immensely holographic soundstage. And number 3, just to deliver really good tone. Now I'll talk about how it hits on those goals later on, but first let's focus more on what you get with the Hawk. So with the Hawk, you get a 1-inch titanium dome tweeter from MB Quartz that's anchored by the wonderful 5.5-inch ScanSpeak Revelator woofer. Absolutely love this driver. And what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to lift the speaker now. They come with what's called the claw, which is essentially a decoupling device. And in fact, if that's not enough, on the bottom of the speaker, you're going to see this little rounded out area where you can put aluminum balls that come with the Hawk in case you want even more decoupling capability. Now, on the back, you're going to see a bi-wiring terminal. These are going to be gold-plated WBT terminals. And ignore the jumper here. This is actually an aftermarket jumper. So, yeah, my bad. But ultimately, yeah, this is a very beautiful, very well-built speaker. If you want any more information on the specifications of this speaker, just click on the description box down below. I'll have them. But with that said, let's talk about how the Hawk sounds. All right, so the first thing that you guys need to know about the Hawk is, well, it's something of a diva, which means it likes what it likes and it doesn't like what it doesn't like. So if you're the kind of person who you're just looking to buy a pair of speakers, you want to throw it into your room, just throw it on your existing gear, you don't want to mess with any of it, and you just want to get exceptional sound, then yeah, the Hawks definitely aren't for you. But if you're somebody who says, you know what, if I like what these speakers can do, I'm totally willing to work towards getting the most out of them, then keep watching because that's pretty much who the Hawk is for. Now let's talk about the Hawk's general character. And in a nutshell, it has a very airy presentation. It throws out this huge, just absolutely huge holographic soundstage. And when it comes to the general tonal balance of the speaker, you can expect a top end that is going to be boosted. You're going to get a bottom end that's also going to be boosted. But unlike most speakers that have this kind of smiley face frequency response curve, the mid-range is actually going to be full. It's not going to sound very thin, and it's going to sound, most importantly, very tonally adept. And to me, that's what really draws me into these speakers, is I think tonally they do some things that is just really unusual for something at its price range. For example, when it comes to the top end, when I listen to classical music, especially full-scale symphonic classical, a lot of speakers at this price point just kind of beam sound at you. Whereas with the Hawks, when you're listening to all the different instruments in the background, all the sound just kind of floats in the air and it fills the space very naturally like you would hear in a concert hall. And I find that's very, very unusual. And ultimately, the top end is going to be incredibly detailed, and all the subtle little tonal shadings that you hear with various instruments and even the human voice is going to come through in a way that's very unusual for a speaker at its price point. So it's very good in that regard, and the mid-range is a lot like that. The mid-range is going to be incredibly clear sounding. It's going to be very articulate and very tonally adept. Now the bass is where things get interesting. The bass is going to hinge largely on how you have the speaker set up in the room and what kind of gear you have attached to it. So if you're in a pretty small room and you have to put the speaker against the wall and you have gear that, let's say, just doesn't control bass very well, then yeah, you're going to get a lot of output. It's going to sound borderline boomy to you. But if you have a medium-sized space, or let's just say you have gear that can really control the bottom end pretty well, then actually the bass is going to be very tight, punchy, articulate. The sound's going to be incredibly dynamic with the right amplifier. In fact, I'm really impressed by how dynamic these speakers are. I mean, when they hit hard and they hit fast. So that to me is the definition of a speaker that can do good dynamics. So ultimately, I would say that, yeah, the Totem has this light, airy sound to it. The bass can be full, and it can actually be almost too much of a good thing in the wrong situation. But overall, it's just a very balanced speaker, albeit a very colored speaker that's enjoyable to listen to. Now, when it comes to listening to it across many different genres of music, this is what I found. Overall, it's very good so long as you just stay realistic about the speaker size. I mean, this is a very compact speaker. If you want to feel like you're at a rock concert, yeah, it's not going to do that. But if you care more about articulation, if you care more about tone, if you just care more about refinement and quality over quantity, then I think you'd be pretty happy with these speakers. I've come to find the only genre of music I found that they just don't excel with is like classic rock, like the Doors, Led Zeppelin, so on and so forth. I mean, they sound good with it, but that kind of music to me always requires this big, meaty mid-range, which usually means a big, meaty driver. But that's just my personal take. Otherwise, if you like EDM, if you like rock, especially like new metal or something like that, these are actually surprisingly very good. Obviously, wonderful with jazz, wonderful with acoustic, wonderful with vocals. So just keep your expectations realistic. Otherwise, yeah, I would say these are incredibly well-rounded speakers, very musical speakers. So now let's talk about some of the things they don't do well with. Alright guys, so as most of you already know, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this business, and every design is going to have just a little bit of give and a little bit of take. Now with the Hawk, as I mentioned before, it's going to be a pretty picky speaker, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a bonus video, probably in a week or so, that's designed to help you all to know exactly what you can do to get the best sound out of this speaker. And I also just covered the bass. I talked about how excellent it can sound when you treat it right, but if you can't, then yeah, it can get just a little bit overly warm sounding. So now let's focus on my two main quibbles. The first is going to be the top end. Now on one hand, you're going to get this airy sound. It's going to sound very detailed. All the little tonal inflections are going to be there. It's so addicting to listen to, but at the same time, it's elevated treble, which means if you have a bright recording, guess what? It's going to sound bright. If you have bright sounding gear, same thing. And moreover, this is a metal dome tweeter. It's a titanium dome tweeter. And there's some people out there that just cannot stand metal dome tweeters. In fact, I'll admit, I'm one of those people. I really don't like them. Now, to Totem's credit, I think this is a wonderful implementation of a metal dome. But at the end of the day, when you're listening to the Hawk, you're still going to know you're listening to a metal dome, even if it's not as offensive as many other designs. But the big complaint I have actually has nothing to do with the sound at all and has everything to do with that dot. All right, so I know to some of you the dot is a mystery, so let me lend a little bit of light onto this subject. The dot was originally put in place to indicate a specific series. So for example, the Hawk is not a new speaker. This is a 16-year-old speaker. And what our Totem originally came out with was this idea that, okay, when we make a modification to the design, we'll just put a different color up there, boom, done. But they never really stuck with that plan, nor have they ever done anything to indicate whenever they make a change. So for example, the Hawks were last updated in January of 2015. The predecessor before that sounds different from what you hear today. The 2005, 2000 Hawks sound different from what you hear today. The same thing with the 2001, 2002 Hawks. You get the idea. And really, I think this is just a bad decision for a number of reasons. Number one, it means that people have no idea what kind of Hawk they have, because the Hawk has gone through a lot of evolutions in its lifespan. So the only way for you to really know is to just email your serial numbers to Totem and they can tell you. And even then, it doesn't really help you because people aren't talking about, oh, well, I had the Series 1 Hawks and this is how they sounded. So if you buy anything on the used market, then you probably have no idea whether or not somebody's review is relevant to what you're hearing and if their suggestions are really going to help you or not. But the big thing is it's a missed marketing opportunity. Because think about it, when you come out with a new design, you can say, hey, guess what? Series 3 of the Hawk just came out. You should go to your dealer and check it out. You know what I mean? So it's just a very confusing choice that they've made. And to my knowledge, I don't think anyone's really taken them to task on it quite like this. So Totem, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I love your product, but somebody had to do it. So anyways, this is actually a really good speaker. And that brings me to my final thoughts. Alright guys, so it looks like we've come full circle here. At the beginning of the review, I told you all I'd try to deliver the most neutral assessment possible, and hopefully you guys agree with that. Now, with that said, subjectively speaking, I readily admit, obviously I really like these speakers. They do two things that I like really, really well. Number one, tone. They have really good tone. And number two, they're just enjoyable to listen to. They're very musical, and I like that. Now, however, objectively, I got to admit, they're not for everybody. Not everyone's going to like their sound. Not everyone's going to like how picky they are. And it just is what it is. Also, you have to bear in mind that these are compact 2A speakers. And while they handle a wide variety of music very well, it's not for somebody who wants to feel like they're at a concert. If you're that kind of person, then the Hawk really isn't for you. But if you care more about tone, if you care more about finesse, then yeah, the Hawk is actually something that you should consider. All in all, I think Totem did a really good job with this speaker. Yeah, it is picky, but when you get it right, I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. So with that being said, guys, that's my take on the Hawks. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.